Janet Palmer, and I'm conducting an interview with Louis Burry at the Atlanta History Center for the Veterans History Project. Mr. Burry, could you please state and spell your full name?
Louis J. Burry, Louis J. Bury.
What was your date of birth?
Date of birth 10/15/20.
And what is your current address? Okay. Also attending this interview is Mr. Burry's daughter, Claudia Clay. What war were you associated with?
World War II.
And what branch of service were you in?
In the U.S. Army and the 10th in the Air Force.
And what was your rank?
Finally came out as a captain.
And where did you serve?
I served, after the U.S., I served in the China-Burma India Theater, known as CBI, for 18 months. And prior to that, I started off with Camp Pickett as a medical replacement training center, and then to OCS at Camp Barkley, Texas. And then finally assigned to the Air Force to the Bowman Field School of Air Evacuation. And that was, in those days, that's air ambulance. They didn't like to be called air ambulance, but it's air ambulance. And assigned to a 821st Medical Air Evacuation Center as their administrative officer. And went overseas with one enlisted man. With the equipment, the rest of the outfit went first class by troop ship through the Panama Canal to India.
Okay, we want to start out just getting a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Strictly, you know.
Did you enlist or were you drafted?
Oh, I was drafted.
You were drafted.
Drafted.
Do you remember going? How did you feel when you found out you were drafted?
Oh, it was to be expected. When December 7th came around, why, the very next day, 3 or 4 of my buddies enlisted. We were told by a neighbor who was a World War I veteran, don't enlist. They won't get any more benefits than if you're drafted. That happened exactly that way. So we waited. My brother was first in February, and I went the following August.
And where did you go for boot camp?
For training was Camp Pickett, Virginia. It's called an MRTC, Medical Replacement Training Center. And there 8 weeks of basic, and then I stayed on as what they call cadre, which is staff, and trained the next two more groups, and from there I went to OCS.
Do you remember many experiences while you were in your basic training? Are there any experiences that really stand out in your mind?
Oh, the basic training was running the obstacle course and the exercise, calisthenics and so forth, and I was gung-ho in those days, and I relished being a so-called drill corporal or drill instructor afterwards for 2 more, teaching the guys drill and pitching tents and you name it, how to, and calisthenics, putting and so forth, and I relished that part of it. It was good fun. And some same way with when they went on forced marches and so forth, no problem. I didn't get sore feet like my trainees did.
Are there any people in particular that you remember from that time?
Oh yes, 2 of my buddies, 3 of them. Frank Tomkowski was from my hometown. There were about 4 of us from my hometown were in my company, Frank, and then we had 2 more. The rest of the outfit were from Pittsburgh, 60 miles away, 65, and one was Danny Anamitis, and he was my cadre buddy and roommate when we were basic training. or afterwards as we were cadre. He stayed on as cadre. Paul, he went on to become, he went to OSS, Office of Strategic Services, and he had an AGCT, highest I ever saw, 145. Mine was 137. Danny's was 139. Paul was 145. Took 110 to get to OCS. 110 to go to, AGCT meant Army General Classification Test. You're talking an administrative officer, and I had to know all that stuff.
So when you finished your basic training, you said you went to OCS?
No, basic, I stayed on as cadre for 2 whole periods. I think the next period was at about 10 weeks long, and then there was a 12 weeks long period, and then about midway through the 3rd period, I never did finish it. I went to OCS.
And where did you go?
I went to Camp Barkley, which is Abilene, Texas. Not Abilene, Kansas, but Abilene, Texas. West of Fort Worth, Dallas.
How was that experience?
That was quite an experience, and I'm very glad to have been cadre for two periods. In addition to, in other words, this is the stuff that they threw at us at OCS, and it was duck soup for me. Nothing to it because I was used to it all. Had no trouble going through OCS outside of the heat. You had to keep your uniform spotless and everything. It's very hard to do in the heat.
Are there any experiences particularly there that you remember that stand out in your mind?
Oh, not too much. Other than I had no trouble. I got to drill the troops and so forth, and always did well because one of the things they graded you on was command appearances. In other words, you had to look like a soldier. And of course, as I said, I was gung ho and young, athletic in those days, no problem. But outside of that, the forced marches in the heat, it was rough.
And once you finished there, where did you go?
Well, they assigned me, I was one of the lucky ones who was assigned to the Air Force. A lot of them stayed in the Army and went to Army medical places, but I went to the Air Force at MacDill Field, Tampa, Florida, and there to wait for assignment. First they assigned me to one, and believe it or not, a medical outfit, a dental outfit. That's a dental outfit in Clearwater, and that was Clearwater, Florida, across the bay. But I wasn't there more than 2 weeks, and they changed the assignment to Bowman Field, Kentucky, School of Air Evacuation. So I didn't have to go overseas right then and there with a dental outfit. I went to, and at School of Air Evacuation, the same way. I was a instructor there. One of the things that I taught, of all things, was map reading. I taught the GIs and enlisted men that were there, and the nurses too. They had a bunch of nurses. They were all training to be air evacuation. So I was cadre for a while there, and then finally in March or so they assigned me to a overseas outfit. So I got an 821. In other words, when I first went there, my buddies were assigned to 8, 10, 11, and 12. I think 8, 10, 11, and 12. I didn't get assigned to one until 821. So, yeah.
Once you finished there, where did you go?
Oh, now they sent us overseas, and when he went as an administrative officer, one of my jobs is also to be the supply officer. So they sent me to California, to Wilmington, to port of embarkation with an enlisted man. We were to take the equipment overseas. He was to be on one ship, I was to be on another ship. The outfit went the other way. They went by to Norfolk, Virginia, and boarded a big troop ship, went through the Panama Canal, went to India that way, and we went overseas. I went in a Liberty ship that top speed was 11 knots. Just crawled along. Took me 70 days to get to India.
What was the name of your ship?
The ship was a Segundo Rus Belvis. Segundo means gentleman in Spanish, I think. Spanish Segundo, and Rus Belvis was his name. Ruiz-Belvis. And later on, years later, I found out that it sank off the coast of Africa after the war. But anyway, we went to Calcutta. I went to Calcutta. The outfit went to Bombay, India, and then went across India by train to Calcutta. But our two ships went up the Hooghly River, not the Ganges, but the Hooghly, to the port of Calcutta. There we were sent to up to a province of Assam, India, way up in northeast India. Northeast India was the actual place was called Chabua, Chabua, and there was they had a big airfield there, and it was the jumping off place where they flew the supplies over the hump into China to help out the 14th Chiang Kai-shek and the 14th Air Force. But so we were sent to the Chabua, and at Chabua we were quartered with the first outfit that was there, believe it or not, 803 Medical Air Evacuation Squadron that had been evacuating patients from India from the start of the war almost. But they thought we were going to relieve them. They found out no, we weren't there to relieve them. Our job was to go up to further north up to Lido, Assam, and evacuate only the casualties out of Burma. Combat casualties, 803rd was to evacuate the non-combat across the rest of India to Karachi from Calcutta. So we were assigned to Lido. We moved up to Lido. We got our own base in Lido set up, and incidentally we sent right off the bat, we sent off one flight of nurses, 6 nurses and 8 enlisted men, and a medical officer to China to work with the 14th Air Force. And the rest of us stayed in India to work with the 10th Air Force, but we were stationed there for till the end of the war, evacuating.
And when did you arrive? When did you arrive there?
Oh, I arrived at the first part of August 44. That's right. And I always say I celebrated on D-Day, June the 6th. I was 2 days across the equator in the Pacific. we crossed the equator on June the 6th, June the 4th, first time, and then we went down around. We got about 18 hours shore leave in Fremantle, Australia, which is the west side, Perth, the big city. Fremantle's on the ocean, but and there up through the Bay of Bengal to Calcutta. So,
What was your daily life like?
Daily life was uniform was shorts and shoes, tennis shoes if you could get them, but certainly not anything heavy. Shorts and shoes, and it was hot, and we lived in what we called beshas, bashas, and 803rd had they had tents. They had what was known as the British 10-man tent. And the reason it was called 10-man tent is it didn't hold 10 men. It only held 4 men. It took 10 men to pitch it. I had to learn all over again how to pitch a British tent. It was a desert tent. But anyway, we lived in British, except for the officers. When the men lived in these 10-man tents, and they were always pitched on what was known as a plint, a P-L-I-N-T, and the plint is like this table, and it was set up off the ground about 18 inches. The reason for that is water, monsoons. Around here you worry about a ground cloth when you're camping, about water. In India you get up 18 inches. But anyhow, the quarters for the 803rd had their mess hall. I remember when mess hall was, what they made is the engineers would construct a building out of bamboo that was flattened bamboo. They took the bamboo, flattened it, beat it with a hammer, flattened it, and come out and made almost like a board. And then they would weave that into big sheets and nail that to a frame. And that was the outside of the house. The inside of the house they would line with burlap. The reason for the burlap was keep the bugs out and the snakes. They wouldn't come through burlap. You keep mosquitoes out, so wouldn't keep mosquitoes out. But anyhow, and the roof was always a sheet metal roof, corrugated sheet iron roof, but it was packed with leaves that were bamboo leaves and whatever else leaves they could get on top, about 18 inches thick for insulation. That was to cool it off inside. So we had, in Lido, we were fortunate enough to have the engineers built for the nurses 2 barracks, I guess there was 2 nurses to a room, and we had 19 of them, so almost 20, so they must have been 10 rooms, 2 5-room barracks in a long line with the bamboo sides and the rush roof, so forth. They also had a water tower. They had their shower was, believe it or not, was heated with a coal stove. Of course, it had a rush roof and so forth, and they burned it down one time. They got it too hot. I remember one of the exciting 2 things for the nurses. One time they called for us to come over because there was a snake in the shower and up on the roof, and I think he knocked it down and killed it with a shovel. But it was what's a snake in India? The one that has the puffed up head and so forth. I forgot. Cobra. It was a cobra. He had his whole head up and puffed up, and they hit him with a shovel and practically cut his head off. But anyway, I hit him. But the thing was that later on that thing burned down. They also had a water tower there, and we had the water pumped from airstrip. Their nurses' quarters was on a hill above a rice paddy, former rice paddy, and the rice paddy had been built up, and there was an airstrip out there that we flew out of that airstrip, but we were on one end of it, and they had a well down in there, and then pumped the water up to the water tower, and we could tell whether it was full. We had hung a bucket on the inside with a weight on the outside, and when it would get empty, why, the weight would be up near the top, and then it was time to start the pump and pump it back up, and the weight would go back down. You watch the thing and would turn the pump off, and the nurses had a special generator of their own for their own electricity, and we had a Jeep generator on our side, a Jeep motor, and it put out, of all things, believe it or not, was enough electricity, 3 kW, 3,000 watts. And you can buy these generators today. But anyway, the 3,000 watts in it. We had a special guy that his job was to run that generator, keep it running with gasoline, and also to run the pump on the other side and the nurse's generator. That's all he had to do all day long, was keep them both running. And of course, we had the enlisted men. We built a special area for them. We put all the tents in. I laid it out, being a former layout in a steel mill and drafting. But anyway, we laid it out in a quadrangle, put all the tents in around the side, except the one side was open towards our mess hall. The engineers built us a mess hall a supply house, a 4-room thing for the officers, which were and they built us a day room, and a squadron headquarters. So they were all built with the bamboo things with the rush top and so forth. We had roads coming into the place. We had to get into the place, we had to go through a medical supply warehouse, and they had these big long warehouses built out of bamboo with rush top, long rectangular warehouses in which all the medical supplies for that end of the theater were stored there. I don't know what all was in it, but you could get in there, you could get anything medical. I don't care whether it was generators or whether it was X-ray generator machines or what, but they were stored in there because of the place where they had 2 general hospitals in our area too, 69th General and the 20th General, 2 general hospitals. General hospital, a numbered general is as high as you go in the Army, general hospital, because otherwise it's in the state side they're named like Walter Reed and so forth, Massachusetts General and things like that. But anyway, in the overseas they had their own nurses and so forth.
Are there any experiences most memorable experiences you have during that time?
Well, we had different ones. The nurses, when we were at Chabot with the 803rd, they had been there quite a while, and when you have nurses, you can get anything. The officers fall all over themselves making sure the nurses get taken care of. So the nurses would, but anyhow, they had a swimming pool. It was built out of boulders, rocks, cemented, so forth, on a wall with cement bottom, but the sides were just boulders cemented together. But they had a swimming pool, and they had a tennis court, one tennis court. So when we got to Lido, nurses right away, we didn't have any room for a swimming pool, but we did build a tennis court. So we built a tennis court out, and we built a tennis court, again, GI improvisation, and so forth. But anyway, we built the tennis court. The backstops were camouflage nets, so keep the ball from going. Held up with bamboo poles, signal core wire holding, and so forth. The telephone wire holding it. But anyway, that's the way we rolled the court with we had just plain lime for the lines. We rolled the court with a big front end roller from a road roller. We got a front end road roller from the ordnance people, the front end of a big road roller, hitched a bar onto it, and then we towed it around with a recon car around, because the Jeep wouldn't tow it. Jeep was too heavy for Jeep. Jeep would overheat. But we had a heavier car, and we would tow that thing around and roll it, keep it packed. But that was our way we played tennis. We managed to get some rackets from and so forth, and some of the guys later on somebody flew down to Calcutta and got some good rackets from a sporting goods store in Calcutta. But tennis balls were supplied by special services. Memorable. I can remember two instances with fire. One me and one of my buddies. We had a pit that off to the side where we threw brush in that, and we wanted to clean it up because it would attract mosquitoes. And so I told one of the youngest kid in the outfit, anyway, Blackie, to go burn it. So he went over there to burn it, and he poured some oil on it and so forth and burned it, and it wasn't burning fast enough. So he decided that I'm going to put some gasoline on it. And he got himself a bucket of gasoline, so it's a motor pool, stood up there on the side of the pit, threw the bucket of gasoline on. Gasoline hit the hit the flames that were down there and just come right back up all the way to the bucket to him. And he's bare chested and so forth. Hit him right in the chest. So forth. He was burned for quite a while. We didn't send him to the hospital. We took care of him ourselves since we were medics. Same thing happened to me where we had, for our mess hall, we had a you had to wash your utensils when you come out, your mess kit and your cup and so forth. You had to dip them, one to wash the slop off, and then you had to dip them in another 2 more that were hot, boiling hot to scald them. That was the GI way. And the first one was just slop bucket, regular GI can, regular garbage can. The second one were 2 had to be heated, and we built a fire under them, and the fire took too long to get it heated up, the big garbage can. So read in the theater where the Air Force people, someone had devised how to make a blowtorch underneath it. You make a blowtorch, and so I had the thing made, and we had the thing made, and we put it, it was raining and so forth, and we had a tent there to the side, and we were starting, and we had a big can of gasoline coming down feeding this thing, and it was about 10 feet long, enough, well, maybe not quite 10 feet long, but it was enough so that you could put 2 GI cans on it. It would heat both cans, and with jets coming up from the bottom. So the gasoline come down, hit those jets, burn, and so forth. Well, gasoline come down, it was working fine. The thing was cross-threaded. The thread to connect the gasoline to it was cross-threaded. The pressure from the stuff coming down from the heat built it back up, it hit the gasoline, and the gasoline went like a snake, you know. And I'm standing there watching what it called. Hits me right in the legs, right on the shoes. I had GI shoes on, heavy, but it nothing above them. I had long pants on. It was winter time then, and gasoline went up the fire and so forth, went up my legs, burned me on both legs. We dashed out of the tent and so forth and laid on the ground. I grabbed one leg, pinched it shut the air off, and one of the guys come running out of the mess hall, which was next door, and he dives on the other leg. Dives on the other leg and smothers it and so forth. So he smothered. So I'm laid up for a couple weeks at home with bandaged legs, and I have pictures of myself always from the top up and so forth. When I sent them home, I didn't want my wife to know that the bottoms were burned, so forth. It was pretty painful, very painful.
Did you go on any of the evacuation flights?
I went on one evacuation flight down in. When the officers heard about it, they said, "Nothing doing." They said, "You're married, have a baby at home, and so forth, and on top of that, you're not on flying status. We are. We get paid for flying down there into combat. You don't." So that's the only flight I made, one down there, but I did get to go down. That part was very interesting, the way we actually did it. They had combat cargo ships with the doors off. They took the doors off of the ship and put the cargo in the bay with a parachute attached to a parachute, and they would fly over the troops and kick it out. They had guys kick it out. They paid them extra. I think they give them a corporal's rating, and they got half again. But anyway, they were called kickers. Their job was to lay in the thing, hold onto the bar, and when somebody pushed the thing in front of them, to kick it out the door as they flew over. But anyway, they would fly that, then it would fly back empty. Well, our troops, our medical personnel would go down in the morning on our air evac, and they would land at all these fields. First they would land at one place, drop off a nurse and a tech, and go to the next field, fly to the next field, further down into Burma, closer to the combat zone. When they got to the front lines, the medical officer was along with, and his technician were the last one. They were the ones that got closest. The nurses weren't allowed to get close to the front line. But anyway, when they got there, they the plane would land and taxi over to the side of the strip in the jungle. They would have the patients would be laying there in the shade, trying to shade them as much as possible. And they would check with the medics that were on the ground. They said, what have you got? Do you have any litter patients? Or do you have any walking wounded, and so forth? What do you got? Take the records. And when they got the data, then they would, on the field telephone, they'd crank it up across the tower that they had there, a little bamboo tower. And the tower's job was to call one of these ships flying back empty. Cargo says, come on down and land, we got patients to go back. They had theater orders when they were told to get down, court-martial offense if they passed it up, because you have to take patients back, and they didn't like to take patients back. The reason for it, when they took patients back, they weren't allowed to jump bail out and crash your plane if something went wrong with it. They had to land it themselves. They said, you got patients on there, you got to land it. They didn't want to land it. If they could, the pilots said, we'd sooner bail out. And that's the reason for this map here. This is a map that they had in their chute. But these maps showed all of Burma and told them so forth how to, you know. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, this map is the kind of map that they had in their, you know, they had the map in their chute pack. And when he would bail out, this map was in there along with all the necessary supplies to bail out. So they were told that follow the map, find water and find a stream, and then follow the stream to get out, because you don't want to go through the jungle or hack your way. But there would be a machete in that seat pack. The chute was known as a seat pack. You sat on the parachute, and right on top of it was a flat pack. It wasn't any bigger than that frame there. And in that frame, inside of that frame, canvas frame and so forth, was K rations, fish hooks, collapsible cup, pills for water, pills and all the stuff that you might need to survive. And believe it or not, one of the things was in there was a 45 caliber shotgun shell. Bird shot was in them, because when you bailed out, you had a 45 on your leg, a 45 caliber on a revolver on your leg, strapped to your leg, and that was your only weapon for survival, that 45, and it had bullets, but a bullet couldn't kill. But you had bird shot; you could kill birds and rabbits or anything like that with a bird shot. So the shotgun shell, and they made the pistol into a shotgun. So that was the way they survived to bail out. A lot of the guys survived that bailed out, because those ships were just wired together. Every landing they would cross their fingers, and every takeoff they didn't know whether the ship would hold together or not for another landing.
But are there any people that you particularly remember from your time over there?
Oh yeah, we remember them all. Afterwards, for quite a while there, we had would correspond with a special letter and so forth, telling where everybody was. And next thing you know, I started to get smaller and smaller. Deceased. Never did find certain ones. We never did contact them of the outfit. But we had 2 reunions, one at Bowman Field, and then, but I don't know what it was. And then a little later we had one of our, this was with nurses and so forth, because they were at Bowman Field, they were putting a special plaque in there for the field for the fact that this is where the School of Evacuation was located during World War II. And that was one place that we went to, and we got quite a few pictures group pictures of the people that were there. Half of them are deceased since then, you know, that wasn't too long ago. And then it went to San Diego, and this time one of we had of our surgical technicians, they were the enlisted men that would accompany the nurses down. Of our surgical technicians, about 3 or 4 of them became doctors afterwards. They went to med school. And one of them is a optometrist. He's the one that started the one in San Diego. And another one was a cardiologist. And another one was, believe it or not, he was a gynecologist, baby doctor. High Pockets. He was the biggest one in the outfit. He's known as High Pockets. Yeah, and yeah, High Pockets. And then of course the medical officers, correspond with them. Dr. Pat. Pat was my buddy. He was captain, and later on he became our CO, and he promoted to major. So I got a picture of him, me pinning his oak leaf on when he got promoted. I have to send it to him. I think he's still living.
Did you have any interactions with the local people there?
No, we were told, believe it or not, they were the local people we had to more or less stay away from because they were working for their independence at that time. The Indians were working for their independence, and our British allies said, don't help them out. So incidentally, everything that we did over there was lend-lease. Lend-lose, you might say, but it was lend-lease. We had laborers work, 2 sets of laborers, working in one crew just were malaria control, just did nothing but keep the vegetation down, and scalped right down to bare ground, and the other crew worked in the mess hall. As they did all the work. Our GIs didn't. Our GIs were, who would normally be potato peelers and so forth and scrubbing the mess hall, didn't do that. They were now almost second cooks or third cooks, but the Indian laborers did all the work for us. And real funny, one particular instance is they were, when they're over there, they're barefooted, and they use their feet as well as they use their hands. And one day they caught one of the Indians working in the mess hall cutting a loaf of bread by putting it on a bench and holding it with his foot. He didn't let him touch the food after that. Yeah, we didn't let him touch the food after that.
How was the food?
Food was good. It was excellent. I was telling Jen that the food was good. We had our Spam and our, SOS. It's crap on shingle. Spam, cream Spam on toast. But SOS, but you ate it. This was good. And it was food. And what else? Whatever was good. I can remember once the first Thanksgiving we had. Normally you would get canned turkey, GI canned turkey for Thanksgiving. Not us. Our CEO says, no way. He sent all the way down to Calcutta and got back fresh turkey. We had fresh turkey. Calcutta was about as far away as from here to New York City. And but he sent down there to get, we had fresh turkey. We also all chipped in, all the officers chipped in, and for a fund to buy condiments, because the GIs didn't have all they had was one brand of ketchup maybe and one brand of mustard, and that was it. And we made sure that we went down there and they bought the relish and different brands of ketchup, and stuff, anything, all the stuff to cook with. But they brought it all back. Our cooks had everything that the officers had bought to make sure that everything was seasoned properly. As they say, we had the mess hall was divided. The officers sat in one end of the mess hall, enlisted men ate the other. One thing about the mess hall is, as you went in at the noon meal, at the noon lunch, you had to take an Ativan tablet for malaria control, and that was a substitute for quinine. And you take the Adderall tablet. To make sure you took the Adderall tablet, we had an officer stationed at the door and give you the pill, and you had to take water from your canteen, pour it in your cup, and take the pill, and right there to make sure you took the pill, almost like in the hospital, to make sure you took the pill. But the Adderall itself turned you yellow, your skin yellow. So all of us had yellow behind the ears and yellow eyelids and yellow between the fingers. But that's the only place you could tell, because the rest of us was tanned. You couldn't tell that underneath the tan was the skin was yellow. But yeah, the Adderall, you know.
Did you get some?
Oh, I want to tell you one thing about real interesting. We were stationed near the town of Digboy. Digboy was a little bit, but Digboy was at the oil fields for, I didn't know that, I found that out later, the oil fields for Assam, for India. And that's what the Japs were trying to get. They were trying to come through Burma to get to those oil fields. And they were run by British interests, who had British colonials. And being British colonials, they made doggone sure that they were going to live as good as they did at home. They had a country club. After they got done working in the, whatever they had, the offices for the wells and so forth, then they retired for their tea and so forth in the afternoon at the country club. However, the country club, in addition to the country club, was a true country club. It had a swimming pool and lawn tennis courts, Wimbledon style. And one of the nurses heard about it, so she says, wanted to go down. Well, they weren't allowed to go anywhere unless they had a enlisted man or an officer drive them. So they said, right away I took the assignment. So the two nurses went down, and two of us enlisted, well, I took one of the enlisted men along, but we went down there, the four of us, and down there to see the place. And we walked out on the tennis court to play. Well, since we were playing tennis on the clay court, a homemade one that we built, there we were. We went from the Honda Civic to the Cadillac. But anyway, we went in there and went out. When you walked out on the court to play, we started to get our rackets ready, and you looked up, and sure enough, Indian wogs, bearers, ball chasers, come along with a purple screen that they took up and for a backdrop. You hit in across the net into a ball with a purple background. You had the ball, you always come in, they had put a purple screen up for us, both sides. And of course, I spent the rest of the afternoon. I remember there was one woman there, I guess his wife was one, and she had a little boy. And me being a water safety instructor, I took her little boy under her wing, and I spent part of the afternoon teaching him to swim and jump off the diving board into deep water and swim away. And he didn't know how to do that. And the mother thanked me for it. She was in a British accent and said, oh my, he could never do any of that stuff before. It just took somebody to tell him, you know. Next thing you know, the kid was jumping off the diving board, coming up, paddling away to the side, to the ladder. He had no fear of the water. But the thing was, that was a memorable experience. I even wrote a paper on that. Later on, I went to school in GI Bill, and you had to write English themes and so forth. So I wrote one on tennis experiences in India, how we built our own tennis court, and going to playing on the clay, and then playing on a real tennis court.
Did you get any medals or citations during the war?
Oh, they give me a Bronze Star medal. This one right here. Oh, this one would be for, the Bronze Star medal is for just meritorious service in a combat area. See, they just gave one to Jessica. Jessica got one. Yeah.
What about
What's that? You see it again?
Are there others?
Yeah, that's the medal. This one is the Asiatic Pacific ribbon with 3 bronze stars. We got one for the India campaign, the Burma campaign, and the China campaign. All 1 for 3. 5 points apiece. We're coming home. Incidentally, the 803 only got 2. They never got the China one. They didn't have anybody in China. We did. And they were mad as a hornet because when they found out that you could have got a 5th star. Yeah, this is just the American theater. For America, everybody did that. The Good Conduct Medal for not going AWOL or being put in a brig or anything like that for a year as an enlisted man. And this one is a discharge, World War II discharge medal. You know, this is a caduceus, medical caduceus with an A on it, which meant administrative. Doctors wore a plain one, nurses had an N, dentists had a D, veterinarians had a V, A meant administrative. You know. Oh, this other stuff here is this other stuff here. Very first picture taken in the PX as a private. This is a patch that you wore, CBI, China, Burma, India. Very hard to get nowadays. Very hard to get, but that's a patch. Dog tags. This one is 0204753. That's my officer's. It starts with an O, but the enlisted men had 332502994. That was in my enlisted serial number. Presidential unit citation. Our outfit got a presidential unit citation for evacuating. My ring from that I pounded out going up. Overseas bars, 1, 2, 3. Every 6 months you get an overseas bar. Now there's 2 meritorious. The reason they're both on here is later on they became red. When I was in the service it was blue. They become red. So I guess if you were like Vietnam, you might have one of these. You'll never get a blue one. OCS patch. When you went to OCS, you wore a patch on your shoulder. So when you went to town, why they knew you were a officer candidate. You had to keep your nose clean. Ruptured duct. Ruptured duct means discharged. Ruptured duct is a discharge veteran that they gave everybody when you discharge. This is called an AGO pass right here, and where officers had your picture on and so forth. You had to show that all the time. I managed to get one. I don't know. You were supposed to have it turned in. How I got 2 was a kind of a long story, but I did manage. I lost one. They replaced it, but in the meantime, they mailed me another one. So I got 2. I turned one in, and I kept the other. So forth. Yeah, 2 dog tags in there, but I don't have a 332. Incidentally, being an administrative officer, you could read the records, and you could, you know, you could tell a person by his serial number, an enlisted man, pretty much his service. First number was 1 meant you were, if you had a 1 in front, meant you were regular Army, you enlisted. 2 meant you were National Guard. 3 meant you were drafted. So mine started with 3. The next number is 3, 3, 3. 3 meant I was in the 3rd Service Command. There was about 8 or 9 service commands. Pennsylvania happened to be in the 3rd Service Command. So you looked at it, you could tell right away whether they the GI was from your in the country or not, or was he from California, just by knowing which service command that he came from. Yeah.
You mentioned the ring that you had there. Could you tell me a little bit more about that ring?
Oh, the ring was, we were going overseas. We were stationed in, we stopped for 18 hours. That's the only time we got 18 hour shore leave in Fremantle, Australia. And their coin, one of the coins was an Australian florin, Florin, a coin about the size of a quarter. Could be a little bit bigger. But the sailors on our ship told us that you could make a ring out of it. They said the way you make the ring is you take the coin, turn it on its side, and with a hammer keep tapping it on something solid. Keep tapping it on something solid and keep turning it around. Eventually it'll flatten and roll out. And when it flattens and rolls out, when you get it to the size that you want, then you bore the hole out in the center, and then you polish it. Polish it by rubbing it on your pants and so forth, and keep rubbing it until you get the shine right, so forth. So that's it. I hammered the ring out, going overseas, sitting up front on the bow of the ship. Took us 70 days, as I say, to get, well, took us a little longer, but between Fremantle and going up through the Calcutta into the Bay of Bengal and so forth, I hammered that thing out, went down into the engine room and borrowed a file to bore the hole out with and so forth, and file it down to get the inside of the right dimension, and then the rest of it polished and so forth. And I wore that ring for quite a while, 1972, I guess.
And when was this that you made? What year was it that you made this ring?
The ring was made in going overseas in the summer of 1944.
And when that was a wedding ring?
That was my wedding ring, yeah. Yeah, it replaced the cheap wedding ring that I bought at the time Sophie and I got married, but yeah, that replaced it.
Do you remember when you got discharged, the end of your service?
Oh yeah, discharging was, believe it or not, they had enough points. I had enough points, plenty of points, but I had to wait for a replacement because I was officer, medical, and so forth. So I had to wait until they had an officer replace me, and then we had already sent half my outfit home. They all had oodles of medals. But anyhow, they all went home. I followed them. We went to Karachi, India, and from Karachi, India, boarded a transport there, waited for a transport, and then that took us home across the sea, around Arabia, up the Red Sea, through the Suez Canal, into the Mediterranean, through the Straits of Gibraltar, across the North Atlantic to good old New York, Verrazano Narrows, coming up into New York City. That was quite a sight to come up, see the bridge. You see the bridge long before you see the Statue of Liberty. You see the bridge first.
And when did you arrive in New York?
We arrived around December 2nd or 3rd of 45, until we took us from the port of debarkation in New York. We went across the way to New Jersey, and from New Jersey to Indiantown Gap, which is where I was inducted. Indiantown Gap is just south of Pittsburgh, and there I was supposed to be discharged on the 7th of December, 1945, but that was Pearl Harbor Day. It was a holiday. So they discharged me the next day, the 8th. And I'm coming out of the office with my papers, come down the steps. Who's walking up the walk? Dominic Canterna, one of my buddies from OCS. I said, Dom, what happened to you? He never went overseas. The lucky dog was, he was a basketball player, and he was stationed in General Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee before he went to OCS. And when he got out of OCS, they wanted him back. Basketball player. The hospital had a good basketball team. He was captain of the basketball team. He stayed there for the whole war, stateside. Now, funny thing is, I come home, and then from there I went to Vintondale. Now, Vintondale, PA, is 19 miles from Johnstown. Now, that ended my round-the-world tour. I had started off there by leaving Sophie and the baby off there in May, or was it late April 1944. Went back to Bowman Field, across the country to Wilmington, California, all the way to India, crossed India and back up through, and I got a round-the-world trip on Uncle Sam. I made a complete circuit. Complete circuit.
You had said something about having enough points to get out. How did that work?
Oh, points was 85, was you had to have enough points, and they labeled that on Army service, and you got an extra point for being overseas, if it was overseas service. So let's say I was in the Army roughly 42 months, I guess, 3.5 years, and 3.5 years, and 18 of it was overseas. So that's right again, that jumps it up. You got 5 points for every dependent. At that time, when I took Sophie home with Pat, the baby, she was pregnant with number 2, Joella. This one wasn't born yet. Number 2. But anyway, I had 3 dependents, so I got 5 points for each dependent. I got 5 points for every medal. 4. This one didn't count. You got that afterwards. I didn't have that. 5 points for every medal. You got an extra point for every battle star. 1, 2, 3. Extra point for other. What else are they? Oh yeah. Well, that was anyway. That was more than 85 when you add them all up. So that's when you have it 85, you could get out. Now our enlisted men, the ones that were down in flying, they got the air medal for flying, plus this maybe the second time they won it. If they got it for just the number of hours that they flew. That's the way you won your air medal. You flew so many combat missions. And they also got, anytime they repeated, the second time they won it, you get a star to add to it. Some of them even got the next medal higher up, the DFC, Distinguished Flying Cross. They had enough medals. After you earn the air medal a couple of times, then you can get the Distinguished Flying. So some of them even had the DFC. Some of them, they would fly every day if we'd let them. They didn't care. So go down there and back, go down to Burma and back, bring a load of patients back, and that was it.
And what did you do once you came back?
Oh, once I come back, we were lucky enough, being an ex-GI, why they bent over backwards to my hometown to help you. Got an apartment, got furniture for it, refrigerator, bedroom set, things like that. Furniture was hard to get, refrigerator was exceptionally hard. So forth, we got it all, but being an ex-GI, why they bent over backwards to help you. And I got my old job back as a layout, and I started to work. I went under the GI Bill. They had started a veterans high school. Now I wanted to go. My brother, he had enough credits, we both did, to go to school to get a business administration degree, and I wanted to go to engineering school. I didn't have the right high school credits. I had a commercial course. I had took typing, shorthand, bookkeeping. But anyhow, so I went to the veterans school for GI school for high school for veterans for almost a whole year, and I took Jenny. I took algebra, never had. I had some algebra, algebra 1 and 2, trig, physics, chemistry. Took them all. Ended up with a college diploma. So I have 2 high school diplomas, 1 college, 1 commercial, and then I started with. We had a local center, the Johnstown Center of the University of Pittsburgh there, where you could go to school for 2 to 2.5 years. And I went there for what, almost, I was a junior when I got there. But when I went to University of Pittsburgh, the school there, I mean, I switched jobs I parlayed it into working night turn. I worked 3:30 to 12, so I could go to school days. And I worked 3:30 to 12, and a lot of time I did my studying at work. Instead of laying something out, I have a blueprint laying there, so forth, trying to figure out the dimension on where to make the next mark on this casting. It wasn't a blueprint. It was my math. It was my trig for I did my work. But anyhow, that's the way I got through my math courses and so forth. But anyway, I went through a GI Bill for 3. And then Claudia come along. Number 3, 1949. Time to quit. No school, so forth. So then the Korean War broke out. I said, Korean War broke out, and I said, hey, if you want to continue your education, you got to get back in. So the only way I could continue was the final senior credits, and that were at University of Pittsburgh in campus in Pittsburgh. So we moved to Pittsburgh. We took the big jump, moved to Pittsburgh. I got a job working for believe it or not, since I had college training and so forth, I got a job as a tool designer in the machine shop. And there I parlayed, and they were working on castings for tanks, on the making and machining castings for tanks, which they sent to Detroit to be built into tanks. And from that job, I parlayed that into an actual job working for Chrysler in Detroit, who was actually building the tanks. Because they would come into our place and check our machining and so forth. And anyway, we got to Detroit, and at Detroit, I still didn't have my degree. I still didn't have my degree, but the engineering that I already had was enough, more than enough to handle my job with Chrysler and with quality engineering. And I worked there for 28 years on tanks. So as a mechanical engineer, but quality engineering. And I had a heart attack in '83, and they said that you have to walk and so forth to get yourself back in shape. You can't walk too well in Detroit. I used to walk in the malls in the morning, but in the winter. But one of the young fellows that I had working for me, he left and he went to work for an outfit in California. And he was now a boss out there, and he called me up and said, come on out here. He says, I'll get you a job. He said, we heard about my heart attack and so forth. So I went out there, I got an easier job. Didn't have as much stress, and I worked for him for about 8 years out there in California. So I worked till I was 71, 72. But the only thing that kept me from working even further was the Berlin Wall come down, and they decided they didn't need any more work. But that outfit out there was building the Bradley fighting vehicle. So I'm not only an expert in M1 tanks, all the tanks all the way up through an M1, but also on the Bradley and Bradley tank. So I worked on both of them.
Are there anything else that you have to talk about that I haven't asked you about or that we haven't discussed?
No, other than there's something like that. They were talking about stress and that. I had no stress, although we sent one fella. We actually had to transfer him out. We sent him out because he wasn't hacking it, too nervous and jumpy, and our CEO decided to transfer him out to another outfit. Maybe he doesn't like this or whatever. And we sent a couple of nurses home, supposedly for stress. I don't know. I'm not supposed to know, but anyway, a couple of the nurses went home and for stress, and You know, a couple of the nurses went home for stress. Correspondence was always Soviet. Everything was censored. Oh, I was one of the censors. I had to censor the enlisted men's mail. Some of them were sending home rubies that they bought in Burma, and so forth. One was particular. Believe it or not, his nickname was Ruby. His name was Rubenstein, and he was one of our cooks. And his uncle was a jeweler somewhere in Texas, and he would send rubies home to him because you couldn't get jewels. You couldn't get jewels in the States for repair for watches and so forth. So he would send the rubies home. Now, there'll always be a couple in an envelope and so forth, Ruby's letters home.
Did you ever finish your college? Get your college degree?
Believe it or not, I finally finished the college. And when I was working for FMC in California, they paid for it. However, it became back to the job that I should have done with my brother, business administration. He got his degree in 1950 or 51, and I didn't get mine until 78 or 79. I don't know when it was. 70. I was about 68, 69 years old, I guess, by the time I got that business administration degree. But I'm not proud of it. It's around somewhere. It's around somewhere. I still consider myself a mechanical engineer. Yeah, I always parlayed the job into my work, whatever I could do. The very first, Jenny, this is the thing to remember. The first 3 years in school are the hardest. That's where you learn everything. And the last years you just coast. They give you busy work and stuff like that. Well, that was the last thing they did in mechanical engineering. They made you draw up the plans for a hydraulic from a mechanical press, convert it, run by steam power and so forth, to convert it into a hydraulic press run on hydraulics. In other words, what would you do to convert it and improve it and so forth? Well, the work wasn't that hard. The engineering part wasn't that hard, but you still had to turn around, make all the drawings showing what parts you had to be a draftsman. I said, well, that's not engineering work to be the draftsman. I mean, this is what I said in them. That's not engineering work.
I guess finally, how do you feel that your service affected your later life?
Oh, it gave me a lot of confidence in myself. I was just a kid from Pennsylvania, young guy who's had a good job in a steel mill and so forth, and but going out and you met fellows from all over the country. You run into everybody from all sections of the country. You learned their customs and their manner of speaking, their colloquialisms and so forth, different ways of speaking all over the country. You learn what a Midwesterner spoke like, and what a Californian and what a Southerner spoke like, and what a New Eastern. You could tell from their accent that they were. But coming from Pennsylvania, ethnic background, I could tell by the names and so forth. I could pronounce names. I was the mail orderly for our platoon, and I used to rattle off the names, and the guys would say, how did you know how to pronounce that? You know, I come from Western Pennsylvania. I know how to spell Miskevich. I know how to pronounce Miskevich. But anyway, it was a real experience, going all the way around the world, coming up the Suez Canal, looking over the side of the ship, seeing all these women out there whistling at them, and that were laying there in their bathing suits and so forth, workers for the canal, so French workers, whoever was running the canal, going through the locks coming out at Alexandria, coming out in the Mediterranean, the rough Atlantic, because it's November, so forth. But India itself was quite an experience. My family gets mad at me because I'm out working in the rain. I say, this is nothing. You haven't been in the monsoon. This is nothing. They complain about the heat. I said, this is nothing. You haven't been in India. You don't know what humidity is. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
All right. Well, that was quite windy.